everyone should be
Jefferson. Jefferson thought everyone should be a yeoman. If you're an independent farmer, what that means is nobody, or you're dependent upon nobody. Your livelihood is decided by yourself, and therefore you can be truly free in his vision of the best form of government, which is a republic. So you can pick representatives and not be beholden to anybody else. Isn't that ironic though? Because Jefferson was a big plantation owner with over 200 slaves. Yet his vision for everyone else besides him, little small farmers.
That you can slowly buy out.
Yeah, never.
Not when he's writing. So, the British were staying in New York. Humiliating defeat for the colonists. But they let him go. They let him get away. And so they fortified here, and did we mention the Hessians?
Yeah.
Okay, those are German, I keep on wanting to say missionaries now. Once I said it once, I'm all messed up. But this is actually, it was a nightmare for these Germans. They're from the little Principality of Hesse, so we get Hessians by American mispronunciation. They wore nice green uniforms, see? Color-coded for your convenience. And here's the thing. They're conscripted into the army of this little principality called Hesse, which becomes the norm in Europe, not Britain. And the U.S. would have that same anti-conscription feeling. What do we call conscription here? The draft. And what does that mean? You're either in the army or you're dead. No, I'll kill you. But jail. Army or jail. We a couple times in our history we had a peacetime draft, but for the most part, that's not in the history of the United States. The draft ended for the last time in '72 in the United States. But as part of a kind of a weird reemergence of the Cold War in '79, they added that we have to, young men, when they turn 18, must register for the draft, selective service. And soon women want to do that, which I think is very fair. Women can defend the country just as well as men can, but it's a legacy of the Cold War. It's one of those things that once you pass a law, it's like, we don't need it anymore. But they just keep doing it. So all of you, if you want a student loan or things, you better register. But back to this. Think about these poor Germans. To their point of view, they're stuck out here in the wild, the absolute wilds. Cold, miserable, and everybody hates them. Nobody likes an occupying army, especially one that speaks a different language. Can you imagine how they were treated? And of course, they hated them in return. Miserable out here in the winter. Now, Washington and his men are huddled over here. Every night he's losing men. They're out of food. Half of his men don't have shoes. Can you imagine the winter without shoes? We're getting there. And you know, think about New Jersey winter. Around 30 degrees and wet all the time. Just biting cold. But the Germans are miserable too. And what they heard was that the Germans were going to be allowed kind of a, you're miserable, so we'll let you have one day of the traditional 7-day Christmas celebration on Christmas Day. Meaning what?
Big trunk.
Yeah, big trunk. One day. Now, here's one thing I do want you to get down. There were spies all over for both sides. Because think about it for a second. A loyalist or a patriot? Let's say you see two people over there in 1776. One loyalist, one patriot, or one of them. You know, we don't know which one. How can you tell the difference?
How well were they dressed?
Yeah, how well they dress. Maybe they wear a label.
Which one? Their names. The one that runs the British.
Wait a minute, if you were a patriot and the British came into town, what would you say?
I'm a loyalist.
God save the king, right? So how do you tell the difference?
No.
So can you imagine how spies would be useful in a war like this? Because you never know who's going to tell the enemy. And so you're going to have spies, you're going to have double agents, you have information spread. These kind of wars are really difficult. I mean, you think, oh yes, we got spies, but then you don't know who's actually on your side or not. And there's going to be spies all over. Patriot spies in Trenton got over to Washington Christmas Day. They're getting all this alcohol in there. Washington, knowing he needs a victory. It's willing to risk it all. and all or nothing. Roll the die. One time.
Wait.
What day?
December 26th.
Exactly. Early in the morning when it's still dark. And attack while they're passed out. They're sleeping it off. And that's when it crossed the night in a sleet storm on December 26th. Thus the Battle of Trenton. And one more thing. Okay, I asked you to read that Common Sense. Thomas Paine wrote that great piece of propaganda in 1775. And the big thing about Common Sense, why I want you to read it, but also it relates very much to the Declaration of Independence, but it's written in such a way that average people could understand. Not in the more kind of flowing, poetic language of a Declaration of Independence. Paine was Briton. He came to the United States for the fight for liberty, and then, that's an E, obviously, right? Yeah. After New York fell and the disasters of 1776, he would write The American Crisis. And this is a great piece of propaganda. Now, I'm going to talk a lot about propaganda, but the most basic definition is, think about how this propaganda wants to influence people to believe a certain point of view. In this context, the patriot point of view. It's not lying, but it is intensely biased and by definition misleading, because you're not telling the whole truth. They want you to believe a certain thing. You are inundated with propaganda. We'll come back to it again and again. I'm going to spend a little bit of time really getting into propaganda when we get to the 20th century. When you think about it with all the modern media, you're bombarded with it more than I was when I was your age. Because what do we have? Logs. Yeah. That's right. Cold War. Look at World War II and Cold War, or the World Wars and Cold War. Really see it. So I spent some time in World War I. Enjoyed some of that. So Washington had his men line up, less than 1,000, bitterly cold. It's sleeting. They're going to have to cross the wide Delaware on rowboats. There's a little bit of ice on it. If the boat's overturned,
You're dead.
yeah, then the river's a mile wide. And so they're, I'm not even going to shut up and let us move. But Washington read them, The American Crisis. And it's a great piece of propaganda. Let me read you the first couple lines because I really like it. There's some lines you might have heard before. It's brilliant. I really like Paine. There's Thomas Paine. Right next to John Brown and Joshua Lawrence Shannon. I did Du Bois, but he came down. But anyways, it starts like this. These are the times that try men's souls. Have you ever heard that before? These are the times that try men's souls. You think about it, the lowest point in the depression, wow. Hey, it's afternoon of the revolution. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will in this crisis shrink from the service of his country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. What is the summer soldier, the sunshine patriot? You caught yourself, good. Yeah, so the summer soldier or the sunshine patriot, they're all for the patriot cause when what's going on. Meaning, times are good, right? We're winning, let's go. As soon as they lost, what happened to them? They're the members of the Congress who fled Philadelphia when times got bad. They're the guys who deserted. Maybe not all of them. Heck, you don't have food, no clothing, and it's cold. It's tough. But then he says, he's looking at them. They're gone. But what about you men in front of me? What's he saying about them? You're the best. You're the ones who will win victory. The true patriots. Which actually is like, as cold as they are, like, okay. Yeah, okay, I feel a little better now. At least for a few minutes. Tyranny like hell is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. It's worth it. It's worth it. It will be worth it. And so, that got them on the boats. got him to cross. It might not be enough to take a musket ball in the face. Think of the realities of it. Why would they take a musket ball in the face? Look at the realities of that. That could happen. Now, soldiers, when they get in that situation, there's a couple big reasons, and it's not money. Money's really not enough. Cause sounds great until, I'd rather live. Right? Causes are always great, maybe to get you on the boat, then to go home. Family. The British are invaders. The British are invading. They're terrified of what could happen to them. How did armies at this time get food? They liberated it from farms and the countryside, meaning they steal it from farmers. Farmers resist. What happens to their farm? They burn it down. They're worried. And the other big reason, I do want you to get that down. This got them on the boat, the American crisis. But what got them to fight, family, but the other thing is comrades. You don't want to let down the person next to you. If you run, they might get killed too. Or you don't want to look like a coward in front of your friends. To this very day, that is the reason, the biggest reason why people do it. Because it's irrational unless you start thinking about it as, okay, I can't let them down. Doesn't mean it always works. And if anybody says the war is for a cause, or they talk about other things like that, usually the people who've never been in combat would be my guess. So he read it. They got on the boat. You ever seen this famous painting over here? It's Jefferson crossing the Delaware. It was drawn by a German, Edward Lutze, and he was trying to promote German nationalism by showing American nationalism, kind of glorifying American nationalism. Kind of funny, isn't it? It's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. It's huge. The painting is massive. And no, he was not standing at the bow of the ship. He's not a lunatic. But they crossed. Then they marched towards Trenton. They could follow their march by the bloody footprints of soldiers who did not boots. It's feet splitting apart. Maybe you could also say another big cause, the reason they fought would be to get shoes. Well, a loyalist spy tried to tell the Hessians. What happened? Couldn't wake anybody up. So they attacked. It was a total surprise. They came into the small village, and the Hessians would sleep in like barns or whatever building they could for heat. And so they just kind of were trying to run out, trying to put their clothes on, and boom, here sweeps in the Continental Army. In fact, half of the men in the Continental Army, their powder got wet, so they couldn't fire. So they just charged in, hoping for the best. Good thing it was, that early in the morning they were surprised. Trenton fell. It's not a decisive victory. It's not one of those like, all of a sudden now the war is over. We finally won. That's what the Americans look at. We won a battle. And then Washington's no dummy. He went south and camped down here. When the British heard a few days later, they sent 15,000 men down the road. And Washington had just a little over 1,000. They're going to wipe them out. That's what they should have done in October. And they might have won the war right there. So this is how I draw them marching down the road. Pretty good, huh? You feel like you're with the march?
Yeah.
So it's going to take a few days. Washington waited till they got to Trenton. And he heard from spies that they're going to attack the next one. This is on the 3rd of January now. So we're going to 1777. Washington did a trick he learned on the frontier, fighting in the French and Indian War. He had his men light campfires that evening, like a normal night, and they did what? Yeah, marched away. So the next morning, the British attacked an empty town.
Yay!
Then Washington turned up here and attacked their rear guard at Princeton, with the colleges, Princeton. And this was one of those battles, it really was a confusing battle. They were taken by surprise a little bit, but the British rallied and pushed the Continental Army back, and they began to run. Washington, though, mounted his horse. Think about how dangerous that is. If you're the enemy, you see a guy on a horse, what are you thinking? Kill him. That's the commander, right? He started, now, he did not swear, but he was waving his hat, screaming at the men, follow me, and he began to ride to the front. He would be hitting men with his hat. Come on, let's go. Follow me, let's go. And they turned around and they begin to go up the hill and attack the British back. The British, exhausted from the day's fight, broke and ran. And Washington followed them, waving a hat like it was a fox hunt. Rally to the hunt, boys. Now, Washington was not a great general tactically, but he had that leadership that would be necessary. Remember, the goal is survival. Survival, and he had it. He had a bullet go through here and his hat when he was on. So it seemed like it was his destiny to do that. Yeah, there's a hole right there. And so, with that, and then, before the British could come back with their main force, Washington fled north to a town called Morristown and spent an absolutely miserable winter, but they survived. And he kept them together. We're in the fight. And when in summer, more recruits. So, big victory. Why these two battles are so important, they go together. Trenton and Princeton. Here's why they go together. This is what you got to get down. It proved to Americans they could win. Not only patriots, but others. Hey, maybe we can win this. We don't have to give up. We can win a battle. Now, if they can prove it to other people. And so while we're doing that, let's quickly do this. Let's get a list down, a chart. British advantages and advantages of the new United States. And you think about it, one side's advantage will be a disadvantage for the other, and so on. What are the big advantages for the British? What do they have?
Numbers.
They had, and not just numbers, but trained, they had weapons, generals, sergeants, all those things necessary for an army. Yeah, and so we can add to that almost unlimited supply. They also have the largest what in the world? Yeah, with a Navy attack anywhere. The U.S. thought the same thing in Vietnam with helicopters. It could go anywhere, so we could win this war. The British could go anywhere on the coast, attack, pull the men out. As it turned out, things were more complex than that. They also had, say, you have money, taxes, borrowing money, or they had all of that because of a government. The Continental Congress, they tried to print currency, but no one thought it was worth anything. How do governments borrow money again? Do you remember? Someone said what? Bonds. They issue bonds. Who would buy a bond from the Continental Congress? What if they lose? You won't get your money back. Britain could borrow money, could issue currency, they could tax. They had an effective government, effective leadership. They had different colonial governments that were now states. You had the continental government and just individuals in the colonies. Also, were the colonists unified? You had those loyalists. Think about the loyalists. You combine those with people who are neutral, and that's over half the population did not want independence. So Britain always knew that we have this great advantage. Of course, then again, maybe the Americans might have an advantage like that. There are other advantages that kind of fit in there, but you get an idea. This is pretty big advantages. What advantages do the Americans have? By the way, I call them Americans. We call them Americans. They did not yet call themselves Americans.
When did they name America?
Well, actually, the term American comes back from the early 16th century. But they didn't start calling themselves American citizens of the United States till 1820. And we'll get to why. Yeah, fighting a defensive battle on your home. You know the terrain, you know the land, and also defending your home. That's a great incentive. What else? Let me tell you one here, because I already said it. Washington would turn out to be a great advantage. Despite the fact that the Congress kept wanting to fire him. Yeah, we have potential for allies. Not yet. But a lot of people are mad at the British. They haven't forgotten the Treaty of Paris of 1763. We got to prove we can win, though. Trenton and Princeton might help inside the U.S., but we need something bigger. What else do we have? Yeah.
All they have to do is survive.
Exactly. All they have to do, that's hard. So I got to survive. But what an easy, it's also about strategic defense, and it's an easy goal. The British literally have to attack and occupied most of the colonies and destroyed the Patriots. The US, they don't have to invade Britain. They just have to hold out. And eventually the British will leave. And that's lead to one more big thing. The British are divided. The Brits are divided. A lot of Brits thought this war was crazy. And more casualties as the war gets bigger and bigger. We're like, end this thing. Let's get out of this. Both sides are divided. Distance. Even though the Americans have a lot of supplies, think how far they had to come. Think how far. Now, we could come up with more examples. Oh, almost got one more. It's cause. Not, causes are relative, but they have a cause. And so, what's bigger advantages? Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. These kind of wars, they're really hard to win. They're really hard to win for either the imperial power is the best way to put it. Doesn't mean they can't win. But they have a lot of disadvantages, despite all the numbers. If the Confederacy would have realized that all we got to do is survive and not try to win during the Civil War, they would have realized that in 1862 and not instead of waiting until 1864, they probably would have won. And I can't even imagine how things would be different. It's incomprehensible. And so it's tough. And so 1877 would be 100 years later. But 1777, how was that for smooth, huh? The British, their strategy was take all of New York. They still call it a colony, remember? But it's a state. What their plan was, which map do you want me to point at? This one? Or this one?
At the same time.
Okay, so here, now that I'm here, I'm old. Their plan was General Howe was here. He would advance north along the Hudson. The British would advance from Montreal this way, taking New York and isolating New England. They figured that's where all the Patriots were. So isolate them from the rest of the colony so it doesn't spread like a disease. In the Cold War, they'll call that spread like a roll of dominoes. And then defeat them in combat. It's an okay strategy, but at least it's a plan. And so, actually the British were hoping to be already on Lake Champlain, but they sent a small force there to build a little makeshift fleet to take the lake. They were defeated by a makeshift fleet made by a New York militia. Yeah, they really built ships, these rough-hewn things that leaked, put a couple cannon on, and stopped the British on Lake Champlain. One of those ships they just brought up, it was on the bottom of Lake Champlain. What they did, the colonists had sunk them, so the British could use them, and then they could bring them up and use them later. They found one about 20 years ago, and it's in the Smithsonian Museum of American History. And it could fit in this room. I wouldn't get on one of those. Those guys are crazy. Yeah. The commander of the militia is Benedict Arnold. He who will soon betray the country. One of the great heroes. So the British had to start out from here and had to fight their way down. They had to wait till summer. It's cold up here. General Howe gets that plan right here. Washington's here. General Howe. And Howe decides, I don't like that plan. The Continental Congress is in Philadelphia, and that's where I'm going. And his brother commands the fleet, so he sails up to Chesapeake and attacks Philadelphia without telling anybody. So the British are going this way, no idea that they're all alone in the wilderness. Now, Howe was thinking, Philadelphia is their capital. Think about a war. You take the capital, they quit, right? This is a different type of war. Oh, I forgot one of the advantages. Add to it. You can do it. What kind of fighting can you do to run the defensive like that? Thank you. Now, guerrilla was not yet used as a term yet. That's a term that would be in the early 19th century. But guerrilla, not gorilla. That's an R. I helped you. Not gorilla, gorilla. What type of fighting is gorilla? Huh? Yeah. And what happens when a big unit comes? A big British unit?
Run.
Often in the countryside. In fact, you go back to your farm and act like you're a farmer. I love the British. God save the king, right? Then as soon as they're gone, and the British didn't have enough men to hold anywhere. So they could go places. But as soon as they left, what happened? Patriots filter in right behind them. They could go anywhere. They could win most battles, but they couldn't hold it because they didn't have near enough men. Not even near. To win a war like this, you need about a 10-to-1 advantage over the guerrillas. No one ever has that. They were maybe a little bit more than, they were maybe 2-to-1. The US and Vietnam was about 1-to-1. No way. We'll find that other places. Because they can attack anywhere, right? It's a real hard thing to fight. So, what happened was in Philadelphia, he sailed up, Washington met him with most of the militia at a place called Brandywine. And Washington's army was nearly destroyed. Once again, left its flanks hanging, retreated. Washington lost almost every battle he fought. But you know what, who cares? All that matters is the last one, right? As long as they don't fire him before that. Philadelphia fell, but the Continental Congress didn't say, oh, you got us, let's quit. So what did they do? They moved. They went to York, Pennsylvania, and kept going. The British would hold Philadelphia for a year and it didn't really matter. Yeah. The Washington's army was just destroyed. And so they took Philadelphia. But they weren't destroyed. And a month later, at Germantown, smaller battle, but Washington's army nearly won. Then would be finally defeated and pushed back. They're getting better. They're staying in the fight. They're not winning, but they're not losing. And now the British have New York and Philadelphia. Oh, and then 12,000 men under General Johnny Burgoyne in the middle of the wilderness, alone and isolated. What we're coming up to is that other battle, Saratoga. Actually, it's 3 battles of Bennett's Heights, but they wrap it together as one battle. So we just call it Saratoga. And they're all in October of 1777. And what happened was, the British were marching down. Their commander was General Jonathan Burgoyne. Gentleman Johnny. He saw himself as quite the gentleman. He had many of the wagons in the wagon train just with his own personal stuff, like wine, food, and supposedly at least one mistress. That's a bad use of wagons when you're out in the middle of the wilderness without food, but he had just assumed to be a quick fix. But by the end of August, he realized we're all alone. And they got to cut a road through the forest. And they got to get to Albany, which is right there. Okay, it's a small town then, now it's capital of New York, but at least you can hold off for the winter. If they're caught in the wilderness up here, when winter hits, they're dead. It's done. What a terrible situation. So, all the Continental armies, just think about whatever men they could find. Some militia, a few soldiers, just whatever they could get together, about 10,000 men under a former British officer who moved to the colonies, offered his service, Horatio Gates. Now, Gates, as it turned out, was not a great general, but he understood one thing. Hold the high ground between Burgoyne and Albany. If he can't drive me out, I win. There'd be 3 battles fought there. And actually, some of the biggest heroes of the American Revolution would be there. The fighting Quaker, which is supposed to be a contradiction, Nathaniel Greene, Daniel Morgan, and his second in command, Benedict Arnold.
So Horatio Gates was the patriot?
Yeah, he's patriot. Arnold, though, disobeyed orders in the second of these battles, and Arnold was put under arrest. House arrest. Okay, tent arrest, because he was in a tent. And Arnold is in the tent when the battle's being fought under armed guard. Well, he could hear the battle, and it's his men that he had commanded. And he started seeing through the flap of the tent men running away. The British in that third battle finally broke through, it looked like. And it was absolute panic near the end of the day. It looked like the British are going to win, get to Albany. Who knows? Arnold sneaks out of the tent, grabs a horse that's riding by, swings himself on the horse, and starts riding to the front. He grabs a rifle, holding the barrel, starts beating soldiers and screaming every obscenity in the book. They had a book of obscenities in 1777, obviously. Most of them we still have today. I know you've never heard of it. Just people do swear occasionally. And the ones that were unique for that time, you know. He's yelling them all, hitting the men, and they begin to stop. They begin to rally. And the British who've been fighting all day were exhausted. Seeing the men rally around Arnold, they lose faith. They've had enough. They pull back, save the day. Burgoyne realizes he's done. And Saratoga would be a decisive victory for the new United States. Decisive. Arnold would take a long war. Musket ball, mini balls in the Civil War. Yeah. A musket ball right here. By the way, 1777, what did they do with a wound like that? They're about right. They might take a metal probe or brass probe and try to stick the hole and gouge it out. And then just probably going to die anyways, infection. Nothing they can do about infection, man. He lived. It took him over 2 years to recover. And the thing was, Arnold, to his point of view, never got the credit he deserved. Not only for Ticonderoga and Champlain and a few other things I didn't tell you about in class. And here, he's horribly wounded, and Gates got the credit. Burgoyne surrendered his army to Gates. If you go to the United States Capitol, there's a massive painting of his surrender on the rotunda. Most people think it's Yorktown, the end of the war. It's actually Gates and Burgoyne. It was given to the U.S. by the French. And before we get to the outcome of this battle, what happened to Arnold? There's nothing, you're not right. Probably could say it differently, but there's nothing more corrosive than somebody who feels slighted. Somebody feels like they're not getting the credit. They're being mistreated. Because they begin to think everything is a slight against them. And it builds and builds. And Arnold felt he was mistreated. And so he would recover in Philadelphia after the British evacuated it. And he was befriended by loyalist families. In fact, he would marry the daughter of a prominent loyalist family. And they began to try to talk him into joining the British. We appreciate you. But Washington still respected him. And he would give Arnold, in 1780, the command of one of the most important forts. It's on the Hudson River, and it keeps boats from going up the Hudson. They put these massive chains across the river. The links are taller than me. That's how big the chain was. Some are still there. Carefully. What for? Right here. 50 years later, copying the French, the United States put their military academy there. That's West Point. Benedict Arnold got command of West Point. And little did Washington know that he'd already decided to betray. He agreed to give up the fort to the British, basically pull the defenses down so the British could take it. This could be decisive. It opens up the Hudson for invasion. But literally, hours before he was going to do it, the last message he was sending to the British was intercepted. And he barely escaped where he was captured. He actually rode to New York, and they realized, we got a fighter. And so they gave him command of loyalist cavalry in Virginia. It was kind of like a civil war in Virginia in 1780, 1781. So he fought now against the Patriots. And he would die in, 1822 in London. At Saratoga, they have, those monuments, these type of battles, and they have three of the most prominent monuments. And they have three pedestals for monuments. And on one is for Gates. Gates, general on the horse, right? Also Daniel Morgan. one of the other heroes. And then all they have is a pedestal. No label, no statue, nothing, just a pedestal. Yeah. So they don't have a statue for him, but they recognize his contribution. I think that's actually a pretty clever way of doing it. You don't want a statue of a traitor, but still, might not have won without him. So, Saratoga, who came into the war? The Franco-American Alliance. Who else entered the war? All mad at Britain. Well, actually, the Dutch just declared war on Britain. They didn't really worry about the colonies. What other country? Spain. Spain, the Netherlands. I know we don't think of the Netherlands being a big country, but they had a large navy. Now, the Revolutionary War is a world war. And it's going to be fought in the Caribbean. It's going to be fought in Europe. It's going to be fought in Africa. It's going to be fought in India. And now Britain spread throughout the world. Remember how France was spread out and allowed the British to win the French and Indian War? Now it's going to happen to the British. So, with the British, what did the French provide? Troops, weapons, supplies, and money. Over half of Washington's army by the end of the war were French. The United States could not have won without the French, because it provided them supplies so they could keep going and survive. So as a nation, we must do whatever France wants for the rest of our existence. Huh?
Actually, we probably have to be back.
Yeah, I figure World War II paid.
Yeah.
We're even. I think we're even.
World War I. World War
Nah, World War I, they won that. That wasn't one. World War II, they're still kind of resentful. Yeah, okay, so, last thing for today. 1778, the British begin a more limited war with what's called the Southern Strategy. Hard to spell for some reason. What the British decided was this. All right, now we're spread out. We'll hold New York. But then there are more loyalists down here. A lot of plantation owners didn't like that whole men created equal thing. Anybody want to guess why?
Slaves.
So, the British thought there were more loyalists down here. So what they thought is if we go down here and secure loyalist support, at least we'll hold these valuable tobacco colonies. But part of the reason why it seemed like there were more loyalists is because the war was fought up here. What's going to happen when the war is fought down here?
They're all going to turn.
You start creating patriots. Now I told you how they got food, right? Did I tell you that?
Yeah. Okay. They burn.
So what do you think is going to happen in the South? Everywhere the British Army is going to go, they're going to create more patriots. And so in 1778 and 1779, they take Savannah and Charleston. Now they're ready to move up. In fact, they humiliated American forces at Charleston. But there are American forces in the middle of South Carolina. They were talking about putting Gates in command, but Washington kept the command. But now Gates, that same Gates from Saratoga, in the middle of South Carolina. And the British have to get them. And that's the last steps to Yorktown and the war. Sound good?
Yep.
That was pretty close getting done. Oh, and I will draw you one more map.
Yay.
That's it?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was sincere, and thank you. Please look at the review list. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to ignore you tomorrow. I will answer all your questions in the form of riddles. Okay. It'll be like a medieval test. Have a good day, everybody. What a great way to end the week of test. It could be a 2-day test. I'll have a test on Monday when we go back.
Yeah, let's do that.
Then we'll quick grade them on the stairs and move on.
Yep.
Ooh, a fanny pack. Now that's fun.
I had that.
And I do like that. You don't have, you kind of have Leghorn. You need Leghorn. Which I never understood.
I didn't either.
Yeah. And for about 2 years, they were like the thing. And then they just blankly disappeared.
Did you wear like warmers? Did you wear like warmers?
Yeah, it was more of a. Not me, no. I wore a very traditional 80s outfit.
Sorry.
You're ready to graduate school.
I love my family. Okay, so this is
And you go over there.
I love that.
Yeah.
Analyze art.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
But I love how he's like,
And,
what's his
yeah, the turtleneck is very set. I had a lab seat.
like this is there. Like
It,
direct one. Yeah. Like I couldn't
it would not fit very well.
You're like, Irby, I can't see. And then I like, I can't see. I can't see.
Yeah, it's pretty much any decade. I wear the same thing every decade. When I'm not in school, it's basically jeans. So I've had to change jackets.
The national liberation was made.
Get the class.
So the draft is states.
Oh, good.
Bring their car.
I'm fortunate.
Oh.
Okay, Maria. What are you doing?
All right, so
I'm ready to watch.
I have good news for all of you. It's quiz day in the valley. Now, I gotta admit, this is pretty good. So, we will throw him off the roof and see if the uniform works. And you know the best part is like, yeah, sure, why not? We're now just.
We're just pieces of puzzle.
You're probably less than your money.
We have tissues. It's great. Because they're getting nipples. Like dark, and then
I'm like, I'm saving. I haven't heard either, but
I didn't do it.
well, are you?
You're doing well. People find something. They'll find some little thing. Hey, how we doing? Action paper number 1, 2, give me a number. I feel like grabbing an arm and a leg off the rope.
I am transcribing. I am.
I was walking this one day and I feel like 17 and like it just like popped off and it seemed like this was
I know you're right.
Yeah, I know.
After a year and a half, you just get to. What? Jawohl! Yes. I couldn't watch all things. I was talking to my parents, but the first about I watched the beginning till about I didn't watch last time. They did a good job. And that's one thing I like about it, because usually, they just kind of, and then we enter the war, and they show war. That was one thing I really liked. They interviewed Vietnam, and not just soldiers, but political operatives and North Vietnamese.
My dad was the watching it every night. And so when I get home from work, I have to listen to Vietnam, gunfire, and shouting.
That's what I remember when I was in uni. All right, number one. Oh, I should probably look at the quiz. Okay, I got number one for you. You ready?
Yeah.
Number one. What album of the Kinks did I listen to last night?
Well, I
Oh, come on, people. That's the Beatles. Put -8. My glasses.
The King's Greatest.
No, the Kinks are the Village Green Preservation Society.
Greatest.
That's all I got. I expected you to study. Number one. What was it called? What was it called that you could get, that the young man could get to get out of the draft? What was it called? It could be, first it could be for things like college, marriage, and eventually married with children, and a few other things. What was it called to get out of the draft? Number two. In 1969, what did they institute that would supposedly make the draft more fair? Because before '69, it was done by local draft boards who arbitrarily pick young men. What came next? Number three. In 1967, anti-war groups did a huge march with almost 100,000 people when they marched on what building? Actually, it started at the mall, then marched over the bridge, and then it's actually kind of started at different locations. Number three. 3.5. Number four. What was the biggest anti-war march? Millions of people in October of '69. What was it called? Millions of people came out to oppose the war. Number four. Because the last one was 3.5. 4.8. You ready? Who would declare himself a conscientious objector because he was actually pretty unfairly drafted and become the most famous of the anti-war protesters, probably, as his conscientious objector to the draft? And number six, what did Alice Hertz, Norman Morrison, and Roger Laporte do to show their individual protests against the war? What did they do? One of them was mentioned. Something else. Would you like a bonus?
Yes.
I forgot. I'm gonna come up with a good bonus question. An exciting one.
Was your president?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Who was president when I was born? Why not?
You were born in the
I'll give you a hint.
Wasn't
It wasn't Trump and it wasn't Washington. Yeah, too late. Too late. Huh? It's a bonus question. You don't yell at things. Yes, I was 17. I'm 17.
Wow. Roasted.
Roasted. But I like what you said. I look that young going out. Yeah, I do. I mean, what can I say? Clean living, vitamin something. B12. Would you like another bonus? I forgot. I have no idea.
I looked it up on Facebook. Yes, I was like.
There's no Facebook of me.
YouTube. I will create a Wikipedia.
Would you want to? I'll give you one more bonus question. I don't want a Wikipedia of me.
I will wait, I was thinking about it last
All right, here's the other bonus question. What was the ship that was attacked off of Tonga? Any repeats? Raise your hand. Everyone, you got it. That was good. That was a good quiz. All right, let's grade it. Go ahead and pass it to the person in front of you. Go to the front, pass it to the rear. Number one. I like Arthur and the Decline of the British Empire. That's another good quiz. Listen to the King. They're right up there in my top 3 or 4 bands. Well, the Beatles, of course. I taste. And then
Really, my
What word is this?
What's number 2?
It's close. The Kinks or Green Day.
Green Day. Are you evil?
I really like Green Day. I saw them this summer.
What? Kansas City.
And then the Clash. I like a lot of British bands. And Chuck Berry. Okay, number 1. Deferment. Deferment. Number 2, a lottery. Something about a lottery. Number 3, the Pentagon. If you go back there today, I've had to drive back in that northern part of Virginia. They have now put a bunch of roads, and these roads sometimes wind to dead ends because there's a way to. Because the anti-war protests to try to avoid, they would go into smaller groups and they come together, and so they put these roads and try to block them off so they run them into dead ends. So you really got to be careful driving in Northern Virginia near the Pentagon. It's kind of funny. Yes.
For number 2, they said draft number / cards.
No, because they had cards before the lottery. Number 4. I forgot.
Just say it. You know it.
Number 4, the moratorium. The 1969 moratorium.
Wait, what'd you say? I don't know what it is. No.
3 was the Pentagon, right? 4 was the moratorium. 5, Muhammad Ali. 6, they all set themselves on fire.
Hey, Mr. Barker. I wrote down Cassius Clay as that particular answer.
But that wasn't his name. His name was Muhammad Ali.
He was Cassius Clay. And then he switched to the road.
But once you switch your name, that's your name. You would get really, really mad. In fact, that was a major. No, that was a major insult.
Well, you go ahead and solve right now. I would give
No, that was a way to insult him. I will let you have it, but you just insulted it. It's just like,
well, you'll let him have it.
You're right. I'll let him have it because he's been wearing that leather thing all day.
Bring the draft cards also, like, it's like that.
They did, but that wasn't the big protest. And bonus question. Bonus question. Andrew Johnson.
Wait. Let's go.
Lyndon Johnson.
Oh, do I get a credit?
Wait, I said, yeah, I said Canada.
Not quite that.
What if it was like very?
If it was Kennedy,
No, I
that
like
was
asked about that. I was like, what is the question you were posing? I think you're
yeah, why not? And then no, there was Lyndon Johnson and Oh, the other bonus? The Maddox.
Yeah.
Who got Johnson, by the way? You, a couple?
So you're not mad.
Everything's relative.
No, Marjorie, you're hurting my brain. Well, now we
And see, Andrew Johnson would have been 1867.
No, that's
That was actually, that's
Panama! How do we do? How do we do? How do we do? I don't know what else the sword is. Oh, okay. Wait a second. What quiz were you taking? All right, who got? Let me ask again. Who got 5 or better? Raise your hand. There's a few holes mixed in here and there. Who got 5 out of 6 without writing Cash's play?
How do you even know that?
Get out of here. Get out.
Go get the fan.
Yeah, you can actually do it. Do it.
You're not hard at All right, so let me get one more thing done. Let's talk a little bit about the draft. As soon as Mr. Chauncey gets, it all depends on him. Like I told you, one day it's just going to be Mr. Chauncey. Oh, and I have a note to send home to all of you.
It doesn't make sense. That seems like you're watching a movie without the sign. Why are we watching Platoon with more violence than Full Metal Jacket? Full Metal Jacket has language, but Platoon.
Yeah, directed by Kubrick. By like all.
Where's the list? I'm not going to go into great detail why. Platoon's actually better to show the war than that. And there's a couple other reasons that we just leave it at that. Okay. Now this one, it's a note for. Yeah, I did. I did it with the small. I could have done smaller. I don't want to take all the credit, but all right. I should have made fortune cookies. Permission slips cookies.
Just think about Play-Doh.
You're in that of all things,
Play-Doh, you don't have to be just Is this just like a wash or not? Do you not understand?
All right, this is what we got to do. Now it is. Now it's rated R, and it's rated R for violence. And there's a couple other things. There's some language, and they try to go as accurately as possible. Oliver Stone was a veteran, and it is semi-autobiographical. It does have, he embellished it, and does certain characters in such a way to give some stereotypes. But it really does present certain parts of the war very well, and it does relate to what we saw in Breaker Moran at the beginning, which I thought was a good way to start. Has that same kind of. Do you have 2?
Yeah.
So you get. No. What you do is, all I want is an initial, get it back to me. And here's the deal. If there's a reason you can't watch or have any questions, they can contact me, and we'll figure out something else to do. But the big thing is violence. And that is why, for the most part, it's rated R. In fact, for the language, it would be on the edge of PG-13 with R anyway, so it doesn't use the language all. So it would be 1 for the language, probably it would be PG-13. But there's a couple other little situations in there when they talk about soldiers, especially kind of the terror that soldiers have and how they talk to try to alleviate it. And so I think it's pretty realistic. But there's a couple scenes in there that are very emotional. And they're well done. Oliver Stone is a fine director, even though he has some interesting views on things. He is a very good director. So, with that, we're going to watch, have a little assignment with it after the presentations, after the interviews. Thank you. Sound good? I know you'll like it. It's a really good movie, but it is. There are some moments there that are powerful. Very good actors, including pre-drug addict Charlie Sheen.
Pre-drug addict.
Yeah, I think it was his first movie. You could really tell they dumped those actors in the middle of the Filipino jungle. They went through a lot of the real deal. When they're exhausted, the actors, they look exhausted. It's because they really are.
Like, are you joking?
I'm not joking. Yeah, they kind of did a mini basic training, and they lived in the Filipino jungle.
That's not fun.
And Charlie Sheen, not Charlie Sheen. He who is maybe the greatest.
Maybe that's what really the drugs. He's like,
Yeah, I think there are other issues. And he's still alive.
yeah.
Kind of a miracle. All right, so just a couple things. If you have any questions about Full Metal Jacket, we're not going to watch it. If you have any questions, why did you say Full Metal Jacket, punk? Platoon. If you have any questions about Full Metal, it is a well-done movie. I saw it in the theater, and it on the big screen, it was pretty shocking. It was good. I paid. I'm not like maybe the other person in this conversation.
Yeah.
First off, I didn't need to sneak in because I was old enough. Jeez, I was way old. Wow. That's always a weird thing to think. Yeah, I was already an adult. Okay, so. I lived through it. No, I did not wear it.
Don't be ashamed of
Like,
that.
I'm so happy somebody. I just was mystified. And you know what? If you like them, so just a couple of things, we'll talk about the draft, and we'll talk about the draft number and all that. Then just have to set up whenever Mr. Chauncey can come down and take over. And so we got right to the whole thing about, I told you about the Kennedy administration, Johnson. So Zim was killed, Kennedy was assassinated. There's no evidence that Kennedy would have probably gotten the war. What happened? Do we have big Zim on there? Did I get to that? Oh yeah, what were the little villages? They act like they're villages, but basically that's almost like concentration camps where they force all the people in the countryside. Yeah, the strategic hamlets, which are a lot like the concentration camps. And it literally just ended. It worked so badly. But add one more thing next, I think I forgot to say it. Write down free fire zones. Because what they would adopt is this. And it came out of the strategic hamlets, but eventually they would like grid up the entire country. They started doing this in '63 while Kennedy was still president. And they would grid up the country and say that these areas we know we have no friendlies. So we can bomb any place we want. Now, do you suppose there were friendlies in there? And the thing was, you kill, if a Viet Cong's killed, sure, yeah, maybe it might lead to I filmed the quiz. The whole quiz